In the glittering Hotel Marseille, where secrets lurk behind every chandelier, a glamorous widow, Élise Dubois, is found strangled, a broken pearl earring clutched in her hand. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, arrives for a holiday but uncovers a web of deceit, a blackmailer's threat, a hidden letter, a ladder to a deadly balcony. Was it the fiery Englishman, the secretive artist, the flamboyant opera singer, or the nervous manager? With his little gray cells, Poirot unravels a chilling plot of greed and murder. Who holds the key to the truth? Discover the secret at Hotel Marseille. Chapter 1. Arrival at the Hotel Marseille. The sun dipped low over the Mediterranean, casting a golden sheen across the port of Marseille, where fishing boats bobbed like toys in a child's bath. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit and polished shoes, stepped from the taxi onto the cobbled drive of the Hotel Marseille. The hotel, a grand edifice of cream stone and wrought iron balconies, stood proudly against the sea, though its faded awnings and chipped cornices hinted at better days. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his mustache twitching as he surveyed the scene. He had come for a quiet holiday, prompted by a letter from his friend Captain Hastings, who swore the hotel's charm would soothe even Poirot's restless mind. Hastings, alas, was detained in London, leaving Poirot to savor this respite alone. The lobby was a study in opulence, with marble floors reflecting the glow of crystal chandeliers. A porter, young and wiry, with a name tag reading Jacques, whisked Poirot's valise away, while the manager, Monsieur Henri Laurent, greeted him with a bow that was just a shade too obsequious. Laurent was a thin man, nearing 50, with slicked back hair and a signet ring. He twisted nervously as he spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, it is an honor," he said, his voice smooth but strained. "We trust you will find the Hotel Marseille most agreeable." Poirot's green eyes flickered over Laurent's anxious demeanor, noting it as one might note a misplaced comma in a sentence. Settling into a velvet armchair in the lounge, Poirot sipped an apéritif and observed his fellow guests. At a corner table sat Madame Élise Dubois, a widow of striking beauty, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her emerald gown shimmered, but her fingers toyed restlessly with a pearl necklace, and her eyes darted toward the door. Nearby, Mr. Leonard Baxter, a burly Englishman with a florid face, muttered over a newspaper, his tweed suit clashing with the room's sophistication. Mademoiselle Clara Moreau, a young woman with ink-stained fingers and a distracted air, sketched furiously in a leather-bound book, her chestnut curls falling over her brow. And then there was Signor Giovanni Rossi, an Italian opera singer, whose booming laugh and gesticulating hands drew every eye as he recounted a tale of La Scala to an uninterested waiter. Dinner was served in the dining room, where tall windows framed the darkening sea. Poirot, seated alone, savored a perfectly prepared sole meunière, his attention divided between the food and the guests. Madame Dubois and Mr. Baxter were at adjacent tables, and Poirot's sharp ears caught a fragment of their conversation, sharp and low. "You owe me, Leonard," Madame Dubois hissed, her voice barely audible over the clink of cutlery. "The debt must be paid, or I shall speak." Baxter's face reddened further, and he muttered something Poirot could not catch before storming out, leaving his meal untouched. Clara, meanwhile, glanced at Elise with an expression Poirot could not quite place. Fear, perhaps, or resentment. Signor Rossi, oblivious to the tension, sang a snatch of Puccini to the delight of an elderly spinster, Miss Evelyn Gray, who clapped her gloved hands. As coffee was served, Poirot retired to the terrace, where the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and salt. He contemplated the undercurrents he had sensed, the nervous manager, the widow's veiled threat, the artist's furtive glances. "The human heart, it is a puzzle," he murmured, stroking his mustache. "And puzzles, they demand to be solved." His reverie was shattered by a scream, piercing and raw, from the upper floors. The terrace doors swung open, and guests poured out, their faces pale. Jacques, the porter, emerged breathless. "It's Madame Dubois," he gasped. "She's dead, strangled in her room." Poirot's holiday, it seemed, was over before it had begun. He followed the crowd to the second floor, where Inspector Duval, a stout policeman with a walrus mustache, was already barking orders. Madame Dubois lay crumpled on her suite's Aubusson rug, her emerald gown askew, a silk scarf knotted tightly around her throat. Her eyes stared blankly, and one hand clutched a broken pearl earring, its mate nowhere to be seen. The room was undisturbed, save for a slightly open window letting in the sea breeze. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the earring. "Curieux," he murmured. "This earring, it does not belong to her ensemble." Inspector Duval, mopping his brow, turned to Poirot. "Monsieur, you are the famous detective, oui? Perhaps you might assist?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Hercule Poirot is always at the service of truth," he said, his mind already turning over the fragments of this new mystery. The Hotel Marseille, with its glittering facade, concealed a darkness he was determined to illuminate. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The Hotel Marseille, bathed in the pale glow of dawn, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot ascended the grand staircase to Madame Élise Dubois' suite. The Mediterranean murmured beyond the windows, a serene counterpoint to the grim task at hand. Inspector Duval, his walrus mustache bristling with authority, awaited him at the door of room 204, where a small crowd of maids and porters hovered, their whispers hushed by the weight of death. Poirot, his patent leather shoes silent on the carpet, adjusted his tie and fixed his green eyes on the scene. "Order and method," he murmured to himself. "These are the keys to unlock the secrets of the human heart." Inside, the suite was a study in elegance, its cream walls adorned with gilded mirrors and a chandelier casting prisms across the Aubusson rug. Madame Dubois lay where she had fallen, her emerald gown fanned about her like a spilled jewel. The silk scarf, a delicate shade of lavender, was knotted cruelly around her throat, its ends trailing like a mockery of grace. Her face, once vibrant, was frozen in a mask of surprise, and her right hand still clutched the broken pearl earring Poirot had noted the night before. He knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the earring, its jagged edge glinting faintly. "This pearl," he said softly. "It tells a story, but not one Madame Dubois chose to wear." Inspector Duval, pacing near the window, mopped his brow with a handkerchief. "Strangulation, Monsieur Poirot," he declared, his voice heavy with the self-importance of a man accustomed to simpler crimes. "No signs of a struggle, no forced entry. The door was locked from the inside, but this window—" He gestured to a tall casement, slightly ajar, its curtains swaying in the sea breeze. "It leads to a narrow balcony. Someone could have climbed in, perhaps from the roof or another room." Poirot's mustache twitched as he examined the window. The balcony, barely wide enough for a man to stand, overlooked a sheer drop to the hotel's gardens. He noted a faint scuff mark on the railing, barely discernible, as if a shoe had grazed it. "Possible, Inspector," he said, "but unlikely. The murderer, he is not a gymnast, I think. He is cleverer than that." His eyes scanned the room, settling on the fireplace, where a pile of ash caught his attention. Kneeling, he sifted through it with a silver letter opener from the desk, retrieving a fragment of paper, half burned, its edges curled like a dying leaf. The words, "Meet me at midnight," were scrawled in blue ink, the handwriting bold but hurried. "Voilà," Poirot said, holding it to the light. "A rendezvous that led to death." Duval's brows rose. A lover's note, perhaps, or a trap. He beckoned a maid, Sophie, who lingered nervously at the door. Sophie, a slight girl with wide eyes, twisted her apron as she spoke. "I saw Mademoiselle Moreau, the artist, near this corridor last night, monsieur," she said. "It was late, perhaps 11 o'clock. She looked furtive, like she didn't want to be seen." Poirot's gaze sharpened. And what was Mademoiselle Moreau doing, precisely? Sophie hesitated. She was standing by the staircase, looking up toward Madame Dubois's room. Then she hurried away. Poirot made a mental note, his mind already weaving patterns. He turned to the porter, Jacques, who stood rigid, his youthful face pale. "And you, Monsieur Jacques, what did you see?" Jacques swallowed. "I saw Mr. Baxter, the Englishman, leave the hotel just after the scream, monsieur. He was in a great hurry, his coat half-buttoned. I thought it odd, so late at night." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, you are most observant." Inspector Duval, eager to assert control, ushered the staff out and turned to Poirot. "We must question the guests at once. This Baxter, he sounds suspicious, non? And the artist girl skulking about." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture as precise as a conductor's. "Patience, Inspector. The truth, it is not a bird to be caught with a net. It requires finesse." He crossed to the bed, where a faint glint caught his eye. Beneath the frame, half hidden by the rug, lay a brass key, its surface scratched but intact. He held it up, turning it in the light. "This key, it is not for this room," he said. "It belongs elsewhere in the hotel, perhaps to a place of secrets." Duval frowned. "A servant's key, maybe? To a storeroom?" Poirot did not reply, slipping the key into his pocket with a thoughtful hum. His attention shifted to the guests, summoned to the lounge below for questioning. As he descended, he considered the players in this drama. Leonard Baxter, whose heated words with Elise suggested a debt unpaid. Clara Moreau, whose nocturnal wanderings raised questions. Signor Giovanni Rossi, whose theatrical alibi of practicing arias lacked witnesses, and Monsieur Laurent, the manager, whose nervous twisting of his signet ring betrayed more than professional concern. In the lounge, the guests sat in uneasy silence, their faces a gallery of unease. Clara Moreau clutched her sketchbook, her fingers smudged with charcoal, her eyes darting to the door. Poirot approached her first, his manner courteous but probing. "Mademoiselle, you were seen near Madame Dubois' room last night. May I ask why?" Clara's cheeks flushed, but her voice was steady. "I was sketching on the terrace, Monsieur Poirot. The moonlight on the sea, it inspires me. I passed the corridor on my way to bed. That's all." Poirot's eyes lingered on her hands, noting a faint trace of blue ink beneath the charcoal. "And this sketchbook, May I see it?" Clara hesitated, then handed it over, her lips tight. Poirot flipped through the pages, pausing at a study of the hotel's facade, its balconies rendered in meticulous detail. "You have an eye for precision, mademoiselle," he said, closing the book. "But precision, it can reveal as much as it conceals." Clara said nothing, her gaze fixed on the floor. Next, he turned to Leonard Baxter, whose florid face was damp with sweat. "Mr. Baxter, you left the hotel in haste after the scream. Where did you go?" Baxter's eyes narrowed. "To a cafe, for a drink. I needed air after an argument with Elise. It was nothing, a business matter." Poirot's smile was thin. "A business matter worth fleeing into the night? We shall see." Signor Rossi, resplendent in a velvet jacket, waved a dismissive hand when questioned. "I was in my room, practicing Nessun Dorma," he declared, his voice a rich baritone. "The walls, they are thick, but surely someone heard my art?" Poirot's brow arched. "Art, Signor Rossi, is a solitary pursuit, but murder, it requires company." As the interviews concluded, Poirot stepped onto the terrace, the sea breeze cool against his face. The half-burned letter, the stray key, the scuff mark on the balcony, they were pieces of a puzzle, each distinct, yet part of a whole. "The murderer," he mused, "is one who plans, who deceives, who leaves only the smallest traces." His gaze drifted to the hotel's upper floors, where the balconies gleamed like watching eyes. The Hotel Marseille, with its polished surfaces, hid a labyrinth of motives, and Hercule Poirot was determined to navigate it. Chapter 3. The Guest's Secrets. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Hotel Marseille's dining room, where the scent of fresh croissants mingled uneasily with the pall of murder. Hercule Poirot, seated at a corner table with a cup of café noir, observed the guests with the precision of a watchmaker. Their faces, though masked by civility, betrayed flickers of unease. Eyes that darted, hands that fidgeted, lips that pressed too tightly. "The human heart," Poirot murmured, stirring his coffee. "It conceals its secrets, but not from Hercule Poirot." The death of Madame Elise Dubois had stirred the hotel like a stone cast into a still pond, and he was determined to trace the ripples to their source. Inspector Duval, his walrus mustache drooping from lack of sleep, had retreated to the manager's office to telephone for reinforcements, leaving Poirot to conduct his inquiries with the subtlety of a maestro. He began with Mademoiselle Clara Moreau, who sat alone near a window, her sketchbook open to a half-finished drawing of the sea. Her chestnut curls were pinned haphazardly, and her fingers, still smudged with charcoal and a faint trace of blue ink, betrayed her agitation. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding, "you were seen near Madame Dubois's room last night, yet you claim you were sketching on the terrace. This is a contradiction, non?" Clara's eyes met his, sharp and defiant. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was sketching. The moonlight was perfect, and I often wander the corridors when inspiration strikes." She hesitated, then added, "I knew Elise, Madame Dubois, from Paris, briefly. We met at an art gallery. She was kind, but distant." Poirot's gaze lingered on her sketchbook. "And this pen of yours, with the initials CM, its ink matches the note found in her fireplace. Did you write to her, perhaps to arrange a meeting?" Clara's cheeks flushed. "I wrote no such note. Anyone could have used my pen. It was on the lounge table yesterday afternoon. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. The pen, he noted, was a slender thing, easily borrowed, but its presence in Clara's possession raised questions. Very well, mademoiselle, but the truth, it has a way of revealing itself, like a painting beneath a varnish. Clara clutched her sketchbook tighter, and Poirot moved on, his mind cataloguing her words against Sophie's testimony of her furtive presence near the corridor. Next, he approached Mr. Leonard Baxter, who stood by the buffet, piling his plate with more force than necessary. The Englishman's florid face was set in a scowl, his tweed suit rumpled as if he'd slept in it. "Mr. Baxter," Poirot began, "you argued with Madame Dubois about a debt. A serious matter, I think, to provoke such anger. What was the nature of this debt?" Baxter's fork paused mid-air, and he glared at Poirot. "It was business, nothing more. Elise invested in a shipping venture of mine, textiles from Marseille to London. It failed, and she demanded repayment. I told her I'd settle it soon, but she was impatient." His voice grew sharp. "I didn't kill her, if that's what you're implying. I was at the Café des Vagues from 11 until past midnight." Poirot's mustache twitched. "This café, it is near, yes? Yet you left the hotel in haste after the scream. A curious choice for a man seeking only a drink." Baxter's eyes narrowed. "I needed to clear my head. That's no crime." Poirot inclined his head, noting the absence of a receipt to confirm Baxter's alibi. The Englishman's temper, he thought, was a thread to pull, but not yet. Signor Giovanni Rossi was next, lounging in a velvet armchair, his dark eyes gleaming with theatrical charm. His cufflinks, embossed with a crest, Poirot recognized from Monsieur Laurent's signet ring, caught the light as he gestured expansively. "Signor Rossi," Poirot said, "you claim you were practicing arias in your room at the time of the murder. Yet Miss Gray saw you on the terrace before midnight, speaking to someone. This is most puzzling, non?" Rossi's laugh was a rich baritone. "The terrace? Perhaps I stepped out for air, but I was alone, perfecting my phrasing. The lady must be mistaken. Old eyes, they play tricks." Poirot's smile was thin. "The eyes of Mademoiselle Gray are sharp, I think, and your cufflinks, they are unusual. A gift, perhaps?" Rossi's hand stilled. "From an admirer long ago, a trifle, nothing more." The opera singer's evasiveness intrigued Poirot, but he turned his attention to Monsieur Henri Laurent, who hovered near the dining room's entrance, his signet ring glinting as he twisted it. "Monsieur Laurent," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "Madame Dubois was a valued guest, yet I sense she caused you discomfort. Was she, perhaps, more than a guest?" Laurent's face paled, and he glanced at the other guests before answering. "She was demanding, yes, always insisting on room 204, always finding fault. Last week she threatened to report my management to the hotel's owners unless I reduced her rates. The Hotel Marseille, it is not what it was, and her demands—" He trailed off, his fingers tightening on the ring. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this ring, it bears a crest, a connection to Signor Rossi's cufflinks, perhaps," Laurent started. "A coincidence. It's a common design from a local jeweler." Poirot did not press further, but the manager's unease was a note in his mental symphony. As the interviews concluded, Poirot stepped onto the terrace, where the sea sparkled under a cloudless sky. The clues, the ink-stained pen, Baxter's unverified alibi, Rossi's contradicted terrace sighting, Laurent's financial strain formed a pattern, but it was incomplete. He recalled the brass key found under Elise's bed, its scratches suggesting frequent use. On impulse, he approached Jacques, the porter, who was sweeping the terrace. "Monsieur Jacques," Poirot said, holding up the key. "This belongs to a storage room, I think. Where is it located?" Jacques hesitated, then pointed to a side door near the hotel's rear. "The storage room, monsieur, for linens and supplies. Only staff have access, and a few guests who request it for luggage." Poirot's mind quickened. The key, the scuff mark, the letter. They pointed to a calculated act, not a crime of passion. He visited the storage room, a dim space cluttered with crates and folded linens. There, in a corner, he found a ladder leaning against the wall, its rungs worn but sturdy. It led to a trap-door to the roof, and Poirot's pulse quickened. "The balcony," he murmured. "A path to Madame Dubois' room, unseen by most." He examined the floor and found a single pearl, whole and gleaming, matching the broken earring in Elise's hand. "Voilà," he said, slipping it into his pocket. "The puzzle. It begins to take shape." Returning to the dining room, Poirot observed the guests once more. Clara's guarded eyes, Baxter's bluster, Rossi's charm, Laurent's nerves, each held a piece of the truth. The murderer, he thought, is one who plans with care, who leaves clues to mislead. The Hotel Marseille, with its glittering facade, was a stage for deception, and Poirot was determined to unmask the player. Chapter 4. The Artist's Sketchbook. The Mediterranean sun climbed higher, bathing the Hotel Marseille in a light that revealed every crack in its aging facade. Hercule Poirot, seated in the hotel's library, a quiet room lined with leather-bound volumes and faded tapestries, pored over his notes, his small, neat handwriting, a mirror of his orderly mind. The murder of Madame Elise Dubois was a puzzle of many pieces. A broken pearl earring, a half-burned letter, a brass key, Ada, scuffed balcony railing, and now a ladder leading to the roof. Each clue, Poirot murmured, stroking his mustache, is a thread in the tapestry of truth, but the pattern, it eludes me still. His thoughts turned to Mademoiselle Clara Moreau, the young artist whose ink-stained fingers and furtive demeanor intrigued him. Her sketchbook, glimpsed briefly in the dining room, held promise as a window into her mind, and perhaps the crime. Poirot sent Jacques, the porter, to summon her, and within minutes Clara appeared, her chestnut curls pinned loosely, her eyes wary but resolute. She clutched the leather-bound sketchbook as if it were a shield. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite a faint tremor. "You wish to see me?" "Oui, mademoiselle," Poirot replied, gesturing to a chair. "Your sketches, they are most accomplished. I believe they may hold answers to our tragedy. May I examine them?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening on the book, but she handed it over with a reluctant nod. "They're just drawings," she said. "Studies of the hotel, the sea, the light, nothing more." Poirot opened the sketchbook, his gloved hands turning the pages with care. The drawings were exquisite, capturing the hotel's arches, the curve of the coastline, and the play of shadows on the terrace. One sketch, however, stopped him. A detailed rendering of Elise Dubois' balcony, seen from below, its perspective suggesting the artist stood near the garden's edge. The balcony's railing, with its faint scuff mark, was drawn with uncanny precision, and a shadow, vague but humanoid, loomed behind the curtain. The page was dated the day before the murder. "This," Poirot said, tapping the sketch, "is most curious. You observed Madame Dubois' balcony closely, mademoiselle. Why?" Clara's cheeks paled, but she met his gaze. "I saw her there, the night before she died. She was arguing with someone. A man, I think, but it was dark, and I couldn't see his face. I sketched it because it felt important." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you did not think to tell Inspector Duval of this?" Clara's lips tightened. "I was afraid. If I admitted I was there, watching, you might think I was involved. I'm not, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it." Poirot studied her, noting the sincerity in her voice, but also the fear. The shadow in the sketch was short, ruling out Leonard Baxter's tall frame, but leaving other possibilities. Monsieur Laurent, perhaps, or even Signor Rossi. "This sketch, it is a clue, mademoiselle," he said, closing the book. "But whether it clears you or condemns you, that remains to be seen." As Clara left, her shoulders tense, Inspector Duval bustled into the library, a sheaf of papers in hand. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "We've found Madame Dubois' will, sent from her solicitor in Paris. It's most intriguing." He handed Poirot a document, its pages crisp and official. The will named a beneficiary, C.M., to inherit Elise's considerable fortune, including a villa in Nice and a collection of jewels. No full name was given, only the initials. Poirot's mind raced. C.M., Clara Moreau, perhaps? He mused aloud. Duval nodded eagerly. "It seems likely, non? She knew Madame Dubois in Paris. Perhaps a motive for murder?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A motive, yes, but not proof. We must tread carefully, Inspector." He tucked the will into his pocket, determined to confront Clara later. For now, another thread demanded attention. The pearl earring found in the storage room, matching the broken one in Elise's hand. He descended to the storage room once more, the air musty and dim, and examined the ladder to the roof. The pearl, whole and lustrous, lay in his palm, its mate shattered in the crime scene. "2 earrings," he murmured, "one broken in a struggle, one left behind. But by whom?" His inspection was interrupted by Miss Evelyn Gray, the elderly spinster, who hovered at the door, her lace handkerchief fluttering. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I must speak with you. Last night, I heard Signor Rossi arguing in Italian, not on the terrace as I first thought, but in the corridor near my room. It was heated, and I heard Madame Dubois's name mentioned." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "At what hour, mademoiselle?" Miss Gray frowned. "Close to 11:30, I believe. I couldn't sleep, and my window was open." This contradicted Rossi's claim of practicing arias alone, and Poirot made a mental note to press him further. He thanked Miss Gray, who retreated with a nervous curtsy, and returned to the library to reflect. The sketch, the will, the earring, Rossi's argument. They were pieces of a mosaic, but the central image remained obscured. He recalled the half-burned letter, its ink matching Clara's pen, and the brass key, which Jacques confirmed unlocked the storage room. The murderer, Poirot thought, is one who moves with purpose, who knows the hotel's hidden paths. Seeking to test a theory, Poirot summoned Monsieur Laurent, who appeared, his signet ring catching the light as he twisted it nervously. "Monsieur Laurent," Poirot said, "Madame Dubois was a demanding guest, you said. Did she ever request access to the storage room, perhaps for her luggage?" Laurent's eyes flickered. "Once, yes, a week ago. She stored a small case there, but it was gone when I checked yesterday." Poirot's pulse quickened. "And who else has access to that room?" Laurent hesitated. "Only myself, the head housekeeper, and occasionally trusted guests if they request it." Poirot dismissed Laurent, his mind turning to the mysterious package Sophie had mentioned. A case in the storage room, now missing, suggested Elise had hidden something valuable or incriminating. He resolved to search her suite again, but first he sought out Signor Rossi, who was rehearsing in the hotel's music room, his voice soaring through a Puccini aria. "Signor Rossi," Poirot interrupted, his tone polite but firm. "You were heard arguing in the corridor last night, mentioning Madame Dubois. This is not the solitary practice of an artist, I think." Rossi's smile faltered, his cufflinks gleaming with the same crest as Laurent's ring. "A misunderstanding, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "I was speaking to myself, rehearsing lines for a new role. Elise's name. It may have slipped out. She was an old friend, you see." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "An old friend or an old rival? Your cufflinks, they suggest a connection to her past." Rossi laughed, but it was strained. "A gift from her husband, years ago, before his death. A trifle, nothing more." Poirot let the matter drop, but Rossi's evasiveness added another layer to the mystery. As he left the music room, the sea breeze carried a faint tang of salt, and Poirot's thoughts turned to the balcony, the ladder, and the shadow in Clara's sketch. "The truth," he murmured, "is hidden in plain sight, like a star in the daylight." The Hotel Marseille, with its secrets and shadows, was a labyrinth, and Poirot was determined to find its heart. Chapter 5. The Midnight Meeting. The Hotel Marseille stood sentinel against the Mediterranean, its windows glowing like eyes in the gathering dusk. Hercule Poirot, ensconced in the hotel's library, sipped a tisane, its delicate steam curling like a question mark. The murder of Madame Elise Dubois had woven a web of deceit, and each clue, the broken pearl earring, the half-burned letter, the brass key, the ladder to the roof, and Clara Moreau's haunting sketch, demanded his meticulous attention. "The truth?" Poirot murmured, his green eyes gleaming. "It hides in the shadows of time. We must illuminate the hours before Madame Dubois' death." He summoned Inspector Duval, who arrived with a notebook bulging with hasty scrawls. The inspector, his walrus mustache drooping from fatigue, was eager to share his findings. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, "we've established a timeline, rough though it is. Sophie, the maid, delivered towels to Madame Dubois at 11:30. She was alive, dressed in her emerald gown, and seemed expectant, Sophie said. The scream was heard at midquarter midnight by Miss Gray and others. That leaves 45 minutes unaccounted for." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. 45 minutes, Inspector, in which a rendezvous was planned and a life was taken. The letter, "Meet me at midnight." It was no accident. It lured her to her fate. He recalled the blue ink matching Clara's pen, and the scuff mark on the balcony railing, suggesting an intruder's entry. "We must confirm the movements of our suspects in this window of time." Poirot began with Signor Giovanni Rossi, whose claim of practicing arias had been undermined by Miss Gray's testimony of his corridor argument. He found Rossi in the hotel's music room, polishing his cufflinks, those curious links bearing the same crest as Monsieur Laurent's signet ring. "Signor Rossi," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. You insist you were in your room at midnight, yet Mademoiselle Gray heard you arguing, mentioning Madame Dubois's name. And now I learn you were on the telephone with your agent. Which is the truth?" Rossi's dark eyes flashed, but his smile remained theatrical. "Monsieur Poirot, you are relentless. Yes, I spoke to my agent by telephone, arranging a performance in Milan. The hotel switchboard can confirm it. 11:45 to midnight, precisely. As for Miss Gray, she misheard. I was reciting lines, perhaps too loudly, about a role inspired by Elise's elegance." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And this telephone call, it was in your room?" Rossi nodded. "The switchboard operator, Madame Fournier, she will tell you." Poirot made a mental note to verify this, suspecting Rossi's charm concealed more than it revealed. He moved to Leonard Baxter, whom he found pacing the terrace, his florid face damp with sweat. "Mr. Baxter," Poirot said, "you claim you were at the Café des Vagues from 11 until past midnight, yet Jacques saw you leave the hotel after the scream. Your receipt, it is undated. This is most inconvenient for your alibi, non?" Baxter's hands clenched. "I told you, I needed air. The café was crowded. Ask the waiter, he'll remember me. I didn't kill Elise, though heaven knows she pushed me to my limit with her demands." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Demands about a debt, yes? A debt worth killing for, perhaps?" Baxter flushed, but before he could retort, Poirot waved him off, noting the Englishman's temper as a volatile thread in the tapestry. He sought out Clara Moreau next, who was sketching in the garden, her fingers trembling slightly. "Mademoiselle," he said, "your sketch of the balcony, it shows a shadow. A man, you said. Can you recall any detail, however small?" Clara shook her head. "It was too dark, Monsieur Poirot. I only saw his outline. Short, not like Mr. Baxter. I wish I could help more." Her sincerity was palpable, but Poirot sensed she withheld something, perhaps out of fear. Returning to Elise's suite, Poirot conducted a final search, his gloved hands probing every corner. Beneath a velvet cushion on the chaise longue, he found a small glass vial, its label smudged but legible. A sleeping draught, prescribed not to Elise, but to a name he recognized. Monsieur Henri Laurent. The prescription number was intact, and Poirot pocketed the vial, his mind racing. A sleeping draught, he mused, to suggest suicide, perhaps, or to ensure silence. He recalled Laurent's nervous demeanor and the missing case from the storage room, wondering if Elise had uncovered a secret worth killing for. He confronted Laurent in his office, where ledgers lay open, revealing the hotel's precarious finances. "Monsieur Laurent," Poirot said, holding up the vial, "this was found in Madame Dubois's room. It bears your name. How did it come to be there?" Laurent's face paled, his signet ring twisting furiously. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. It was prescribed for my late wife a year ago. She suffered from insomnia. I thought the vial was discarded." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet it appears in a murdered woman's room. Curious, non? Did Madame Dubois know of your wife's death? Perhaps something untoward?" Laurent's voice cracked. "Elise was a guest, nothing more. She was difficult, yes, but I had no reason to harm her." Poirot did not press further, but the manager's fear was a beacon in the fog of the case. He visited the hotel's switchboard, where Madame Fournier, a stern woman with wire-rimmed glasses, confirmed Rossi's call from 11:45 to midnight. "He was loud, monsieur," she said, "talking of contracts and arias. The line was engaged until just after 12. This strengthened Rossi's alibi, but Poirot remained skeptical, noting the call's timing left a narrow window for mischief. As night fell, Poirot stood on the terrace, the sea a dark mirror reflecting his thoughts. The timeline was clear. Elise alive at 11:30, dead by 12:15, lured by a letter, accessed via the balcony. The sleeping draft, the ladder, the pearl earring, they pointed to a calculated act, not a crime of passion. The murderer, Poirot thought, is one who plans with precision, who leaves clues to mislead. He recalled the crest on Rossi's cufflinks and Laurent's ring, a link to Elise's past, and the initials CM. In her will, tying Clara to a fortune. The Hotel Marseille, with its polished surfaces, concealed a labyrinth of motives, and Poirot was determined to navigate it. Chapter 6. The hidden truth. The morning air in Marseille carried the tang of salt and the bustle of a city awakening, but within the Hotel Marseille, a hush prevailed, as if the walls themselves mourned Madame Elise Dubois. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat tilted precisely, stepped from a taxi outside a modest pharmacy on the Rue de la Paix, the vial of sleeping draught secure in his pocket. The clues in this intricate case, the broken pearl earring, the half-burned letter, the brass key, Clara's sketch, the ladder to the roof, and now the mysterious vial, were like notes in a symphony, discordant yet purposeful. The truth, Poirot murmured, his mustache twitching. It lies in the details, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall find it. The pharmacy was a narrow shop, its shelves lined with bottles and jars, the air thick with the scent of lavender and camphor. The pharmacist, Monsieur Picard, a bespectacled man with a precise demeanor, examined the vial's label. "This sleeping draught," he said, consulting a ledger, "was prescribed to Madame Laurent, wife of Henri Laurent, in February last year. She suffered from insomnia. Poor woman. She passed away shortly after, I believe." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this prescription, it was not renewed for anyone else? Madame Dubois, perhaps?" Picard shook his head. "No, monsieur. The vial should have been discarded. It's strange to find it now." Poirot thanked him, his mind racing. Madame Laurent's death, a year ago, had been sudden, attributed to heart failure, but the sleeping draught's presence in Elise's room suggested a darker connection. Had Elise known something about that death? He recalled Monsieur Laurent's nervous twisting of his signet ring, his admission that Elise demanded lower rates to keep silent. Blackmail, Poirot thought, was a motive as old as sin, and the Hotel Marseille was a stage for such dramas. Returning to the hotel, Poirot sought out Laurent in his office, where the manager sat hunched over ledgers, his face drawn. "Monsieur Laurent," Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. "This vial, found in Madame Dubois' room, belonged to your late wife, yet it was not discarded. And Madame Dubois, she threatened to expose your mismanagement, you said. Was it more than that? A secret about your wife's death, perhaps?" Laurent's hand froze on his ring, his eyes wide with panic. "Monsieur Poirot, I swear I did not harm Elise. Yes, she knew. She claimed she had proof I hastened my wife's death to claim insurance money. The hotel was failing, and I was desperate, but it was an accident. Her heart gave out. Elise demanded I pay her to stay silent, or she'd ruin me." Poirot's gaze was relentless. "And this proof, where is it now?" Laurent shook his head. "I don't know. She kept it hidden. Perhaps in that case she stored last week." Poirot nodded, dismissing him, but the manager's confession was a cornerstone in the edifice of the case. Blackmail explained Elise's hold over Laurent, but did it lead to murder? Next, Poirot turned to Clara Moreau, whose connection to Elise grew ever more intriguing. He found her in the garden, sketching a rose bush, her fingers steady, but her eyes shadowed. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, producing the will from his pocket. "This document names C.M. as Madame Dubois' heir. Your initials, I believe. Yet you claimed only a passing acquaintance. This is not the whole truth, is it?" Clara's pencil snapped, and she looked away, her voice low. "My name is Celeste Moreau, Monsieur Poirot. Elise was my aunt, my mother's sister. We were estranged after a family feud. My mother disapproved of Elise's marriage. I came to Marseille to seek her forgiveness, to mend the rift. She promised to leave me her fortune, but I didn't want it. Not like this." Poirot studied her, noting the sincerity in her voice, but also the weight of her secret. And this reconciliation, it was known to others? Clara shook her head. "Only to Elise. I feared if others knew, they'd think I had a motive to harm her." Poirot's smile was gentle, but probing. "The truth, mademoiselle, it protects as much as it exposes. Your sketch, your pen, your initials. They place you close to the crime, but I believe you are not the murderer." His next task was to revisit the storage room, where the ladder and the single pearl earring had been found. The room, dim and cluttered, held an air of secrets, its crates casting long shadows. Poirot examined the ladder again, noting its position near the trap door to the roof. The pearl, whole and gleaming, matched the broken one in Elise's hand, suggesting a struggle or a deliberate plant. He searched the floor meticulously, his gloved hands probing beneath a stack of linens. There, in a dusty corner, he found a small silk pouch, its drawstring loose. Inside was a letter, unburned, in Elise's elegant hand, addressed to C.M. It read, "My dear Celeste, I forgive you. Come to me tomorrow, and we shall be family again." Poirot's heart stirred at the letter's tenderness, but his mind remained sharp. The pouch, hidden here, suggested Elise had stored it before her death, perhaps fearing for its safety. The pearl earring left nearby was no accident. Someone had been in this room, perhaps the murderer. He climbed the ladder to the roof, emerging into sunlight that dazzled his eyes. The roof, flat and bordered by a low parapet, offered a clear view of Elise's balcony below. A narrow ledge connected the two, a perilous but possible path for a determined killer. "The balcony," Poirot murmured. It was not a chance entry, it was planned. Returning to the library, Poirot summoned Inspector Duval, who arrived with news of his own. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "we've traced the silk scarf. It was sold at a boutique in Marseille, but no record of the buyer. And the clock in Elise's room stopped at 12:15. It was wound down deliberately, not broken." Poirot nodded, the pieces aligning. The scarf, the clock, the earring, the letter. They pointed to a murderer who orchestrated every detail, perhaps to frame Clara or obscure their own guilt. As evening fell, Poirot stood on the terrace, the sea a dark expanse reflecting his thoughts. Laurent's blackmail, Clara's identity, the hidden pouch, the roof's access. They were threads in a web, and the spider was close. The murderer, he thought, is one who knows the hotel's secrets, who moves unseen. The Hotel Marseille, with its gilded charm, was a stage for betrayal, and Poirot was ready for the final act. Chapter 7. Poirot's Denouement. The dining room of the Hotel Marseille shimmered under the glow of its crystal chandeliers, but the air was heavy with expectation as Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the long mahogany table. The Mediterranean, beyond the windows, was a dark velvet expanse mirroring the tension among the gathered guests. Mademoiselle Clara Moreau, her sketchbook clutched like a talisman. Mr. Leonard Baxter, his florid face taut with unease. Signor Giovanni Rossi, his theatrical charm subdued. Monsieur Henri Laurent, twisting his signet ring with a nervous rhythm. And Inspector Duval, his walrus mustache bristling with anticipation. The staff, Sophie the maid, Jacques the porter, and Miss Evelyn Gray, hovered at the edges, their eyes wide. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear as a bell. Tonight, we uncover the truth behind the murder of Madame Elise Dubois. Hercule Poirot does not permit deception to triumph. He paced slowly, his patent leather shoes silent on the polished floor. This crime, he said, was no act of passion but a meticulous plan, woven with clues to mislead. A broken pearl earring, a half-burned letter, a brass key, a scuffed balcony, a sleeping draught, a ladder, a hidden pouch. These are the threads of our tapestry. Let us unravel them. Poirot turned first to Clara Moreau, whose eyes met his with defiance. Mademoiselle Moreau, or rather Mademoiselle Celeste Moreau, you are Madame Dubois' niece, named as CM in her will. Your sketch of her balcony, dated the day before her death, showed a shadow. A man, you said, arguing with her. Your pen's ink matched the letter luring her to a midnight meeting. These facts cast suspicion, no? Clara's lips parted, but Poirot raised a hand. Yet you are innocent. Your letter, found in a silk pouch, was one of forgiveness from Elise, hidden to protect you. The ink was a coincidence, your pen left in the lounge for anyone to use. He pivoted to Leonard Baxter, who shifted uncomfortably. Monsieur Baxter, your debt to Madame Dubois and your hasty exit after the scream suggested guilt. But your height, too tall for the shadow in Mademoiselle Moreau's sketch, clears you. Your cafe receipt, though undated, was corroborated by the waiter this morning. You are not the murderer, though your temper does you no credit. Signor Rossi straightened as Poirot's gaze fell on him. Signor Rossi, your cufflinks, bearing the crest of Elise's late husband, hinted at a past rivalry. Your claim of practicing arias was contradicted by Miss Gray's testimony of your corridor argument, but the switchboard confirmed your telephone call until midnight. You had no time to climb the ladder to Elise's balcony. You too are innocent, though your secrets are many. Poirot's eyes settled on Monsieur Henri Laurent, whose face paled to the hue of the tablecloth. Monsieur Laurent, he said, his voice cutting like a blade, you are the architect of this crime. Let us reconstruct it, step by step, with the precision of Hercule Poirot's little gray cells. He held up the brass key. This key, found under Madame Dubois' bed, unlocks the storage room, where a ladder leads to the roof. From there, a narrow ledge reaches her balcony, its railing scuffed by your shoe. You knew the hotel's hidden paths. As its manager, you entered her suite, unseen, at midnight. Poirot produced the half-burned letter. This note, "Meet me at midnight," was written in blue ink, stolen from Mademoiselle Moreau's pen to frame her. You lured Elise to her balcony, expecting a meeting, and there you strangled her with a silk scarf. Not hers, but one you purchased, monogrammed with an E to suggest her own. He paused, letting the silence weigh on Laurent. The broken pearl earring, dropped in her hand, was taken from Mademoiselle Moreau's room, another false clue. Its mate, whole, was left in the storage room, dislodged during your climb. Laurent's hands trembled, but Poirot continued, relentless. The sleeping draught, prescribed to your late wife, was placed in Elise's room to suggest suicide, but its presence betrayed you. Madame Dubois knew of your wife's death, an overdose, not heart failure, to claim insurance money for this failing hotel. She blackmailed you, threatening to expose your crime unless you paid or reduced her rates. Her hidden case, mentioned by Sophie, contained proof. A letter, perhaps, now missing. You killed her to silence her. Poirot's voice rose, commanding the room. The stopped clock, the lavender scent, the pouch with Elise's letter to Celeste. These were oversights in your careful plan, and the crest on your ring, matching Rossi's cufflinks, tied you to Elise's husband, whose death she also suspected you of exploiting. You planned to frame Mademoiselle Moreau, the heir, but your clues were too perfect, too contrived. Laurent stood, his face ashen, his ring glinting as he gripped the table. "You have no proof," he cried, but his voice cracked. Poirot's smile was cold. "The ladder's dust, disturbed by your climb, the pharmacy's record, the scarf's purchase, tracked this afternoon to your name. These are proof enough. And your fear, Monsieur Laurent, it betrays you." Laurent collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. "I couldn't let her ruin me," he whispered. "The hotel, my life's work. She would have destroyed it all." Inspector Duval, stunned, signaled his men, who escorted Laurent away as the guests sat in silence, their faces a gallery of shock and relief. Poirot addressed Clara, his tone softening. "Mademoiselle Celeste, your aunt's fortune is yours. As she wished, her forgiveness was true." Clara's eyes brimmed with tears, and she nodded, clutching her sketchbook. To the others, Poirot said, "Greed and fear, they drive the heart to darkness, but the truth, it always shines through." As the guests dispersed, Poirot stepped onto the terrace, the sea a calm expanse under the stars. Inspector Duval approached, his mustache twitching with admiration. "Monsieur Poirot, you are a marvel. How did you see what—" "I could not." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little gray cells, Inspector. They see what the eyes overlook." He turned to the horizon, his holiday marred but his purpose fulfilled. The Hotel Marseille, its secrets laid bare, stood silent, and Hercule Poirot prepared to depart, his mind already turning to the next puzzle life would present.